I'm grateful to the Theosophical Society in America for this invitation to share some thoughts about famous Theosophists and what they had to say about Theosophy and the Theosophical Society. My name is Pedro Oliveira. Two words were used at the beginning of the Theosophical Society by Madame Blavatsky's teacher. One of them is trial, and the Oxford Learner's Dictionary defines the word trial as the process of testing the ability, quality, or performance of somebody or something, especially before you make a final decision about them. The other expression used by the Mahatmas was forlorn hope. This is the modern definition of it. Something good that you want to happen in the future, but that seems very unlikely. That's the Cambridge Dictionary. Or a desperate or extremely difficult enterprise, Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Supposedly, the Mahatmas used such expressions because they knew what kind of difficulties the fledgling society would face. As the TS is about to commemorate its 150 years of its existence, one may assume that it has passed the trial or trials, affirming itself as a true influence on the world. The early vision of the society was later embodied and interpreted for its times by some remarkable individuals. They had realized the profound purpose in the society's objects and communicated that purpose in their own language. Let us listen to some of them. Madame Blavatsky said, probably in an ironical vein, that it is easy to become a theosophist. Any person of average intelligent capacities and a leaning towards the metaphysical, of pure and unselfish, finds more joy in helping his neighbors than in receiving help himself, who is ever ready to sacrifice his own pleasures for the sake of other people, and who loves truth, goodness, and wisdom for their own sake, and not for the benefit they may confer, is a theosophist. This is in her article, Occultism versus Occult Arts, in the magazine she founded in London, Lucifer, published in the May 1888 issue. So from this statement by H.P. Blavatsky, we can see that she considers that it's easy to become a theosophist. But when she defines a theosophist, you can see that it is not that easy, because it speaks about a leaning towards the metaphysical, of pure and selfish life, and who finds more joy in helping his or her neighbor than in receiving help himself. Of course, that's the language of the 19th century, but she communicates what she intended to communicate. And then if you proceed, she says, someone who is ever ready to sacrifice his or her own pleasure for the sake of other people. That may not be an average attitude of human beings today. Many of them do have unselfish and altruistic motivations. But the sense of self-sacrifice is still probably not common. And then she says that a theosophist is one who loves truth, goodness, and wisdom for their own sake, not for the benefit they may confer. So that is something even more, let us say, difficult in today's world, particularly because our world is so pervaded by social media, and there is this multitude of opinions in social media that it is very difficult to ascertain what is true and what is not true, while goodness and wisdom are really transcendental qualities. This is a photo of Madame Blavatsky in London in 1884, when she went there with Colonel Olcott to visit the London Lodge, which was experiencing difficulties, particularly polarized views and polarized opinions. This is one which I regard personally as one of the warnings Madame Blavatsky left behind for all members of the Theosophical Society, that things can get derailed over the decades. And the responsibility, of course, lies with the individual members, not necessarily with those in office. She begins by saying that every such attempt as the Theosophical Society has hitherto ended in failure, because sooner or later it has degenerated into a sect, set up hard and fast dogmas of its own, and so lost by imperceptible degrees that vitality which living truth alone can impart. It's quite a strong statement. Those who have studied the different religious traditions can attest to it. For example, I am informed that 300 years after the Buddha had passed, Buddhism, the Buddhist tradition was splintered by small sects and groups, each one of them affirming that they represented the true message of the Buddha. And it was necessary for a great philosopher, Buddhist philosopher called Nagarjuna, to give some perspective to all that. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has used some of the Nagarjuna statements very clearly to show that there are no dogmas in Buddhism, there are teachings. The difference between a dogma and a teaching is that one has to be accepted blindly, unquestioningly. And a teaching, as the etymology of the word mentions, a teaching is something that is shown to you for you to consider. And at the end of his life, the Buddha affirmed that by saying that the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis should not believe anything because tradition says it's true, because the text says it's true, or even because him, the Buddha, says it's true. They should only accept that which is authentic and truthful according to their own understanding. And Madame Blavatsky has left the same task to all of us as members. And then she mentions the conditioning of the members, the generation, and how their judgment may be conditioned or warped or biased. And then she says, very poignantly, if then they cannot be freed from such inherent bias, or at least taught to recognize it instantly, so avoid being led away by it, the result can only be that the society will drift off onto some sandbank of thought or another, and there remain a stranded carcass to molder and die. Apparently, the society may have avoided that danger, but the condition that she put forward and she presents here, showing that that danger can happen to this institution because it has happened to others as well. And here again, you will see that she's uncompromising about the nature of a theosophist. He who does not practice altruism, he who is not prepared to share his last morsel with a weaker or a poorer than himself, he who neglects to help his brother man of whatever race, nation, and creed, whenever and wherever he meets suffering, and who turns a deaf ear to the cry of human misery, he who hears an innocent person slandered, whether a brother theosophist or not, and does not undertake his defense as he would undertake his own is no theosophist. So it's a very forceful statement. Part of it is reminiscent of verses from the Voice of the Silence, that one should be completely vulnerable to human suffering, whatever it is, and try to respond to it and not to ignore it. To turn a deaf ear to the cry of human misery. Many years ago, I was conducting a class at the Crotone School of Theosophy, and I was taken on a Sunday to a beautiful monastery in Los Encinos near Los Angeles. And I asked one of the nuns there, what is the meaning of the word Kuan Yin? And she said, the word Kuan in Chinese language means to hear. And then she said, when we hear the suffering of the world, because we are full of conflict and noise inside, we cannot fully hear it. And then she said, but when Kuan Yin hears it, she hears it in a state of absolute emptiness. And therefore her response is compassion. Seemingly to indicating that this bodhisattva of compassion has this capacity to hear without any obstacle or any difficulty. And therefore, in that hearing, there is no gap or space between Kuan Yin's hearing and compassion. Now, this is slightly controversial, but she did write this initially in French, and then it was translated into English. It's originally in La Revue Theosophique, 1889, and it's now part of the H.P. Blavatsky Collected Writings, Volume 11. In its capacity of an abstract body, the society does not believe in anything, does not accept anything, does not teach anything. When I mentioned this in a summer school in Brazil, after the presentation, my old friend said, are you sure about this quotation? I said, if you don't believe me, just check. Here are the sources. She actually wrote that. And this is consistent with the position of the society from the beginning. In the preamble of the bylaws of 1879, it is said the Theosophical Society doesn't have a creed to promote and disseminate. The society does not have a creed of its own, but it allows the members to hold or nourish any belief they want, but as an institution, it hasn't. It even refused, and this has upset people. I had a conversation with Joy Mills about it. This has upset people, some members, and even very committed students, because they said, if you say that theosophy cannot be defined, people may think that it is a kind of a wishy-washy teaching. But the society, by not clinging to a definition of theosophy, is saying that it is an inquiry-based society and not a belief-based society. And this is very important. Finally, from Madame Blavatsky, from the Key to Theosophy again, the TS, was formed to assist in showing to people that such a thing as theosophy exists, and to help them to ascend towards it by studying and assimilating its eternal verities. I call this the complementary statement from the previous one, saying that the society is not committed to any belief or doesn't accept any teaching and so on. And here the society is committed to theosophy in its very name, but the words that she used are very wise words. the society was formed to assist in showing to people that such thing as Theosophy exists. Of course, we do have members for whom Theosophy is the ideology of the Theosophical Society, and they are free to believe in that. But that's not the spirit of a person like Madame Blavatsky. She encouraged people to study Theosophy, but she also pointed out that there are depths in Theosophy that are not easily reached. Annie Besant had a very interesting expression that Theosophy has shallows where a child may bathe safely, but Theosophy has also depths in which a giant must swim. It can be formulated in a very direct and accessible manner, but the deeper parts of it, the individual has to investigate. Colonel Olcott was chosen to support Madame Blavatsky in this task. He did his best. Every leader in a position of leadership is criticized. And there were members that not only criticized, but they ended up attacking his character. But the overwhelming majority of the members, they were very appreciative of his contribution. In an article in the Theosophists in November 1894, he says, one reason for our too general confusion of ideas is that we are prone to regard Theosophy as a sort of faraway sunrise that we must try to clutch, instead of seeing that it is a lamp to light our feet around the house and in our daily walks. So he had a very practical approach to Theosophy. He was a man of action, but he was also a student of occultism and the Theosophical tradition. He wrote a very interesting book called People from the Other World about his experiences in the Eddy farmhouse in 1874 in Chittenden in Vermont. His approach was always very practical, and he wouldn't accept psychic phenomena easily. And then you see, almost echoing the tone of Madame Blavatsky, he said, the one thing absolutely necessary is to cast out as a loathsome thing, every idea, every teaching which tends to sectarianize the Theosophical Society. And we want no new sect, no new church, no infallible leader, no attack upon the private intellectual rights of our members. Of course, this is reiteration, but all the same necessary. It ought to replace a scripture text on the wall of every Theosophist's house. One should ask the question here, why did Madame Blavatsky and Colonel Olcott emphasize this complete freedom of thought within the society, as well as pointing out the danger of sectarianism or dogmatism and so on? Probably the key is in what Madame Blavatsky wrote in the Key to Theosophy, the Key to Theosophy, and that is we carry within us the conditioning that tend us to make absolute things of relative things, and no teaching really is absolute. The Buddha himself stated that. A teaching is something that is shown to us for us to inquire. And then it's a kind of a personal statement. This is in his inaugural address, 17 November 1875 in New York. For if I understand the spirit of this society, It consecrates itself to the intrepid and conscientious study of truth, and binds itself individually as collectively to suffer nothing to stand in the way. As for me, poor, weak man, honored far beyond my deserts in this election to this place of honor and of danger, I can only say that come well, come ill, my heart, my soul, my mind, and my strength are pledged to this cause, and I shall stand fast while I have a breath of life in me, though all others shall retire and leave me to stand alone. The word danger in the statement, my election to this place of honor and danger, the word danger is that the society was the target of vicious attacks in the beginning from different sides. Members of the scientific community didn't regard seriously what the theosophical teachings that were being shared. The spiritualist movement, although some of their members had sympathies, some of them didn't have. And Madame Blavatsky got a lot of hate mail in New York because she dared to point out that not all spirits of light that the spiritualists believe they are necessarily spirits of light. Some of them may be artificial presences or minds and so on. But this is the testimony of Colonel Olcott, and he was determined to continue this work. There is a very interesting incident in the history of the society. In 1886, because of problems and criticisms and crisis, he decided to resign from the TS. And he wrote a letter to the secretary of the executive committee, resigning from the position of president. And that letter was supposed to go through the next meeting of the executive committee. But before that, after he had written that letter, he says in his book, Old Diary Leaves, that he heard the voice of his teacher clairaudiently saying, "You stay in that position until I tell you to step down." And he immediately withdrew the letter, and he was president until he died. I think in this statement he issues one of the keynotes of the TS and how the TS sees its members. We are but simply investigators of earnest purpose and unbiased mind, who study all things, prove all things, and hold fast to that which is good. Again, from the inaugural address. So, members of the TS are students. They are not necessarily teachers. There are members who try to teach theosophy, but they don't teach on behalf of the society. They teach on behalf of their own study and research. They share their discoveries. We move on to Annie Besant. This is a picture of Annie Besant as a younger woman in London, completely immersed on social work. She was very dedicated and very authentic. She said, people often say, why should I come into the Theosophical Society? There is one reason that I may say to you. I do not say it to those outside. There is a reason why you should be within it. You are more in touch with the forces that make the future. You are surrounded, bathed in the atmosphere in which the future shall grow. All that is good in you is nourished by those forces. That's a rather unique way of regarding the membership of the society. But it may be a bit poetic, but it may be true as well, because Theosophy has been seen has been defined as divine wisdom. Both Madame Blavatsky and other Theosophists clarify that that doesn't mean wisdom of God or God wisdom, but it means that wisdom that can inspire the human mind and the human heart. And therefore, it becomes a hallmark of the future. And then she has another strong statement. There would be no lack of life in a TS Lodge were it not that you keep it bottled up for your own advantage, for your own needs. The source of life is inexhaustible, and it only ceases to flow where there is a stagnation, because it is not allowed to run out to the people who have need of it, but it's kept within the narrow limits of a lodge. If you worked as well as talked, if you labored as well as discussed, if you served as well as praised service, there would be no time and no need to discuss how the lodges of the Theosophical Society shall be vivified. On another text, she says that the more a lodge works for the people in mind, trying to help them, trying to offering them the perspectives of theosophical studies, the more spiritual influence would be infused into that lodge. But if a lodge becomes a very select group of people that are just too cozy with themselves without concern for others, then chances are it may not receive the same kind of inspiration and strength. And then this is another classic statement by Dr. Besant. The theosophic life must be a life of service. Unless we are serving, we have no right to live. We live by the constant sacrifice of other lives on every side, and we must pay it back. Otherwise, to use an ancient phrase, we are but thieves and do not repay the gift. Service is the great illuminator. The more we serve, the wiser we become. For we learn wisdom not by studying, but by living. What she says is strikingly important. We may not be aware of it, but whenever we drive on a road, somebody has built that road. Many workers, many materials coming from nature was using that road. The clothes we use were woven by other people with materials coming from nature. We will never know the face of those people who woven our clothes, but it remains a fact that life is this very delicate web of service and sacrifice. C.W. Leadbeater, he joined the society in 1884 after listening to, after corresponding to Mr. A.P. Sinnett. He received a letter from one of the Mahatmas on the same year, and did quite a lot of work for the society. He also became a controversial person over the years, but when he was dying, for example, this is a true event. He was dying in the city of Perth, Western Australia. He had a heart problem. He was in his 80s, and he told his secretary, I need to send a telegram to George Arundel. And he said, she had her notepad and her pencil. She was an expert. She could take down writing very easily. And she said, what would you like to tell Dr. Arundel, Bishop Leadbeater? He said, I'm dying here, carry on. He said, again, echoing other theosophists, on taking up the study of Theosophy, it's necessary that we should adopt an entirely new attitude, that we should open the doors of the mind and learn to treat religion as a matter of common sense, exactly as we do science. On the other hand, we must accept nothing which does not commend itself to us as reasonable, and on the other hand, we must not expect proofs of a nature incongruous with the fact that we are considering. So he appealed towards a common sense attitude in the study, but also we should open the doors of the mind. And one of the famous passages from Madame Blavatsky called the Golden Stairs, it starts with a clean life, an open mind, a pure heart. So she considered those important qualities, obviously, and therefore she shared with others. Theosophy has a considerable literature, but it has no inspired scriptures. We who write books on the various branches of the subject put before our friends the results of our investigations, and we take every care that what we state shall be scrupulously accurate as far as our knowledge goes, but the model which we set before us when we write is not the sacred scripture, but the scientific manual. Some people may question this statement that the Theosophy has no inspired scripture, but the fact is, as mentioned before, no teaching or no book produced by the TS has been stated as being an inspired scripture or something that we should accept as inspired scripture. Then he says, our attitude to Theosophy should, I think, be thus characterized. We must not exchange the blind belief in the authority of the Church for an equally blind faith in personal theosophical teachers. We must preserve an open mind and an intelligent, receptive attitude. We should accept as working hypothesis the truths which are given to us and should set to work to prove them for ourselves. This is in his article, The Attitude of the Inquirer. And the question of authority is a sensitive one because we do have members, and they are entitled to have that attitude, that say that Madame Blavatsky has an authority as a theosophical writer. Well, considering what she has written, she wouldn't regard herself as an authority, probably. But this is something that every member has to consider. This is Mr. Kuru Pummulaji Jinarajadasa. He was born in Sri Lanka. He was educated in Cambridge, and he's a doctor. He got the doctorate of letters in Cambridge University. He became an international speaker and a writer, and he became a president of the TS. There is a very interesting anecdote told to me by Radha Burnier, and her father told this to her, Mr. Sri Ram. Jinarajadasa, Sri Ram, and George Arundel were in Leadbeater's office at Adyar when they were much younger men, and Mr. Leadbeater tapped the shoulder of Mr. Sri Ram and said to him, "There are future presidents of the Theosophical Society in this room." And this is what he wrote in his editorial for February 1947 of the Theosophists. He quotes Newton. "I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting himself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. And Jinarajadasa added, what Newton said applies to divine wisdom, which we call theosophy. In other words, there is a vast ocean of discovery before us. He said, what shall be the role of theosophists in the future? It is, in brief, to unite the material with the spiritual, the object with the subject. All that we have studied of the manifestations of the one life show us that the material and the spiritual, while contrasted as philosophical terms, are not opposed to each other. Matter, however much a veil of Maya may envelop it, is nevertheless a spirit. And David Bohm, in his book, The Wholeness and the Implicated Order, the last chapter is entitled Matter, Consciousness, and Their Common Ground. So he was investigating this. And then he said that within our heart, the plan, or the divine plan, if you like, is at work, as in the roots and stems abriar, the principle of life is at work, fashioning the rose even in the cold, wintry autumn days. That is what Dante saw as the mystery of life, and in what he says is for us a gospel of salvation. I'll leave the Italian language to those who know Italian. The translation is, I have seen all the winter through the briar show itself hard and forbidding, and then it bore a rose upon its summit. It is a theosophical idea which exists in many texts, including On the Feet of the Master. The plan is so vast that a person who sees it becomes one with it. N. Sri Ram was the fifth president of the Theosophical Society, a writer, a theosophist, and of a very quiet nature, very unassuming. There are different possible approaches to what theosophy is. The longer one studies the wholeness of it, the less it is to define it. How can we define a wisdom which belongs to life and therefore lives and breathes, in which there are the depths which belong to what we call spirit, which is subtler than the subtlest mind can encompass, whose every aspect is meaningful with the meaning of spirit? He wrote this article, Why Theosophy is Left Undefined. As I said, there were members that didn't agree with him, or others, they tried to understand, and he was saying, but the truth is the society has not consolidated a definition of theosophy. We have to proceed. Finally, this is Radha Burnier. I had the great honor of working with her at Adyar for some years, and she was also in her early life a dancer, a representative of Bharatnatyam dance of South India, and she featured in the book The River. Contact with the Theosophical Society must help people to recognize that when they harm others, they harm themselves, and when they love others, they create happiness for the world as a whole. The society must be an example of how humanity can be united in affection and in mutual care. That's her own interpretation, for example, of the teaching about the law of karma. When you harm others, you are actually harming yourself, because all life is one. And then we conclude here. She conducted seminars at the Northern Theosophical Center in 1990. Many people attended it. It was a very charged atmosphere. and in which she shared with us her vision for the society and theosophy. And she wrote, universal brotherhood, the realization of a mind in which there is no prejudice whatsoever, no barriers against anything, is regeneration, because such a consciousness is totally different from the ordinary consciousness. The title of her book was called Human Regeneration. And in today's world, a mind without barriers has become of vital importance for humanity to surmount the difficulties of the present. Thank you.